be the last lectures in our course. Both the lectures are dedicated to one topic, Nibbāna. So, this is the ultimate goal of practice. But when you look into the literature, you find various types of Nibbānas explained. So I'll be giving a description on all. But first we'll start with the ultimate aim. I've termed it as the Samnan Bonam. It is it's one of I think French word. It's considered as the ultimate goal of some practice. What is the highest liberation, highest achievement in a certain doctrine or a practice? So it's not an English word actually. It's come from another language. I think it's French. So this, so we know it's Nibbāna, right? We know it's the Nibbāna in termed as. So there was a nice discussion going between two arahants during the Buddha's time. That was Venerable Sariputta and Venerable Mantaniputta Punna. So Sariputta Bhante asked the question, it's the Rata Vinita Sutta, asked the question, why do you practice in the Buddha's dispensation? What is your purpose? What is your aim? So then Venerable Sariputta asked the list of the practice. Is it for the purpose of Sila? Are you practicing here? He said no. Is it for the practice of Samadhi, the concentration? He said no. Is it for the practice of Ditti Visuddhi? I think in Vipassana meditation we know there is a stage that you get rid of the self-view. He said no, not for this. Then Kanka Vitarana Visuddhi, you get rid of the doubt about the rebirth and the doubt of a transmigrating soul. No, not for this purpose. Then is it for the purpose of Magga Magga Jnana Darsana Visuddhi, to understand what is the correct path and wrong path? No, not for that. Then is it for the Jnana Darsana, Patipada Jnana Darsana Visuddhi? Is it for the Vipassana practice? Starting from Udayabdaya Jnana till Anuloma Jnana? I said no. Is it for the Jnana Darsana Visuddhi? That is the Magga Chittas, four Magga Chittas, four Maggas, which eradicates the defilement. Then he said no. So then he asked, for what purpose you are practicing under the Buddha's dispensation? So this is for the Anupadisesa Parinibbāna. That is to attain the liberation, freed from all the aggregates. That was called the Nibbāna. So the ultimate aim of our practice is to attain a state which is called Nibbāna, which is advocated by the Buddha. So I'll start with the page number 19 first. Page number 19. Then the next lecture will be the first page. First I'll explain the Nibbāna. What is Nibbāna? Then I'll come to the various types of Nibbāna. So Nibbāna as a state independent of Nama Rupa. It means this unconditioned state. I'll explain the previous part in the second lecture. This unconditioned state is devoid of Nama and Rupa. Nama is mentalities, Rupa is corporeality. Right? 17.13 fundamental. It is not mixed with them. There is no relation between Nama Rupa and this unconditioned state. It's an unconditioned state. It has no beginning. And it has no relationship with Nama and Rupa, mentality and materiality. This state is beyond imagination. It cannot be fully understood with logical reasoning. That is how the tradition explains. It is something that exists. So, in the first sense, we accept with the faith towards the Buddha and his disciples. So, we consider it exists. Because if I say there is such a state which is unconditioned, the question when someone can ask how it can exist without being unconditioned. But when we go on the explanation, we will find a certain rationale to that. But it cannot be fully explained rationally. That is what I am going to say. So what the Buddha says, there is a state, monks, that is not conditioned, that is not born, that has no death, that has no end, which is devoid of Nama and Rupa, where sun, moon, light, darkness doesn't exist. It is a one kind of a state. If there is no such a state, it is impossible to get rid of this suffering. So he was saying with full confidence that he attained this state. So in our literature we find, before his enlightenment, he passed away in past lives when he met the Buddha Dipankara. He logically imagined of such a state. What was his argument? He was giving a self-argument. If there is cold against the heat, there is light against the darkness. Likewise, there should be a state which is free from this suffering. Suffering means he understood the rebirth, so he knows there is a cycle of rebirth happening. So this is a suffering. So there should be some freedom from this continuous encounter of suffering. So that is what his argument was. So as there is always some state which is devoid of, there is opposite state, cold against the heat, healthiness against the sickness, light against darkness. So there should be a state which removes all the suffering of being encountered in samsara. So then he said it is worthy searching for this, and he became an ascetic. So then fortunately he got the prophecy from the Buddha Dipankara, and then he in that life he practiced, he taught what is the things that he determined to be a Buddha, not to be a Arahant. So then he found out what are the practices that he should follow in order to attain the Buddha. So likewise, both Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, the Pacceka Bodhisattvas and Maha Bodhisattvas, that is the ones who are aspiring to become Samma Sambuddha and Pacceka Buddha, they understand this liberation, with their intellectual thinking to a certain level, and they get strong confidence about it. Right? They get strong confidence. So, but it cannot be fully understood with logical reasoning, because you can ask many questions about it. However, it does exist. I'm explaining based on the Buddha's teachings. Its existence is mentioned in various suttas. For instance, Atti Bhikkhave Nibbāna, Ajatang, Abhutang, Akatang, Asankatang. Monks, indeed, there is a state called Nibbāna, which is not born, has not become, is not made, which is not made by conditions. Right? And he gave lots of synonyms, examples, attributes of Nibbāna, various attributes. It is a state that becomes the object of Lokuttara Magga and Palachittas. When you come into the Vipassana, culmination of Vipassana practice, your mind starts to take this as an object. That is also another point. Moreover, this state is the supreme bliss, and there is no other reality blissful than this state. Nibbāna Paraman Sukham. There is no happiness higher than Nibbāna. So these are some information that we gather, important facts that we gather from the Buddha's teachings. But it's not all. Buddha has explained Nibbāna in various ways, right? In various ways. So, in various ways. But these are some facts. So all these are explaining Nibbāna as something which exists. So when this state is thus explained in the above manner, as a state separate from the generation of Nama and Rupa, the following questions may arise. So when we explain this Nibbāna as a separate, only as a separate state separate from Nama and Rupa, someone can ask these questions. So when we explain thus, what is the problem is, we get an idea. For example, we have Nama and Rupa. Nama is mentality, Rupa is materiality. So we have these two generations existing, following one another. So then, this Nama Rupa generation, so we considered Nibbāna as a state devoid of Nama Rupa. So we consider Nibbāna as something, another state of Nibbāna. Right? State of Nibbāna. So we also know that if we are not free from defilements, for example, if this is our death, consider, die. So if we are not, for example, if you consider this is the place we are existing at the moment, this is the place, there will be some Nama Rupa will arise in future, in this life, and certain cells will die. But as long as the kilesas are not eradicated, that was one of the lectures that I was planning to do, but unfortunately I couldn't complete that lecture. We call uneradicated defilements. And the karma sati, karma force. Force of the karma which was done in the past. So as long as these two are present, right? So I would call anusaya defilement, that is called latent defilements. Latent defilements. So as long as these latent defilements and karma force are present, even we are at this moment, we are bound to be born. And our Namarupa stream is going to continue. Because the reason is, we still have the causes. When the causes are there, it is not possible to stop the result. That is the point. That is a very high, important fundamental in the Buddhist teachings. As when the causes are present, it is not possible to prevent the result. Right? It's not possible to prevent the result. So now, we consider a state of Nibbāna as a completely separate state. So it appears to us, for example, a person attains the Maggaphala nobility. We know he takes Nibbāna as the object. So if we just explain Nibbāna as just a separate state, devoid of Nama Rupa, apart from Nama Rupa, some may get the idea. This is the point. Some may get the idea. This is a certain state which exists apart from Nama Rupa. That is correct. And he may get an idea that Nibbāna is just another state like Nama Rupa. What do you mean by Nama Rupa? Nama Rupa has its own beginning, end, and its ultimate reality. So if someone considers Nibbāna as another ultimate reality, which is apart from Nama Rupa, but similar to Nama Rupa. Similar to Nama Rupa means, like Nama Rupas have their own place of existence, have their own origin, own causes. Though Nibbāna is explained as causeless or unconditioned, some may think because of the lack of information, some may get the idea Nibbāna is just another state, like another world or another state, another reality. So if we take this Nibbāna as the reality, for example, now this is the point. Now if we take about Arahantship, if someone attains Arahantship here, for example, if we say you attain the Arahantship here, Arahantship becomes Arahant. Right? So when you become Arahant, what happens? The latent defilements will be eradicated. The Kamma Samangita, Kamma force will not have the ability to give a result. It's not eradicated. It doesn't have yet the ability to give a new rebirth. Right? It's not able to give a new rebirth. So what happens? The suffering that we were going to encounter after death will be ceased. Right? Will be ceased. It means we are not going to born again. We are not going to have a new life. We are not going to have another death. We are not going only this death. We are not going to have another existence. It means we are free from the suffering. So, if someone considers one attains the Arahantship observing the Nibbāna at that moment, the suffering gets, defilements get eradicated, Kamma loses the ability to give a result because Kamma needs the support of defilements to give the result. So the suffering will be removed before it's arising. Before it's arising, we are free from the suffering. So now, if you look in this diagram, we find there are three states. One state is the Nama Rupa state, existing of Nama Rupa. Right? Then Nibbāna. Then the absence of the Nama Rupa, that would have happened. Right? That would have happened. So, if we take Nibbāna as a separate state, so we get the following questions. For example, one question is, so if I ask the question now we are free from the suffering. So when we aspire for a liberation, when we aspire for happiness, happiness means liberation, I'm talking here. I'll come to that topic in the next lecture. What is the unconditioned happiness? what is the condition of happiness which is felt and happiness which is unconditioned. That's the liberation. Before that. So now we consider we are free from the suffering. So what would we think? What is the greatest bliss for us in this sense? If I ask a question, is Nibbāna is an object, reality? While observing Nibbāna, defilements get eradicated, karma loses its ability, and we are free from suffering. So what is more blissful? This freedom from suffering or this state of Nibbāna? What would be the real bliss? Real bliss would be this freedom. Right? Because it's the absence of suffering. So that's what we are aspiring. So that's what I said. When the Buddha mentioned Nibbāna is the ultimate bliss, and if we consider Nibbāna as a separate state, like another Nama Rupa, it would contradict with the Buddha's teachings. So, Buddha mentioned it clearly, Nibbāna is the highest bliss, and it is an unconditioned state. It is a state which is not made, it has no beginning. So he was not referring to Nibbāna as a separate state like Nama Rupa. Right? So what I want to say is, when we say only this part of information, one can get an idea Nibbāna as a separate state. Then another question may come. How could a person attain this Nibbāna? Does one need go into this Nibbāna? Nibbāna would come to him. So how this Nibbāna becomes a refuge? Because in the teachings, Buddha has mentioned it is the greatest refuge. It is the Nissarana of the suffering. That is the only refuge the beings have, the permanent refuge. So if we take it as a separate state, like another Nama Rupa, we have lots of questions. How could it be the ultimate bliss? Because freedom will be more blissful. It is what we are aspiring for. And how could one attain this? You go into it or it comes to you. So likewise, there can be, and where does it exist? Another big question. If it is like another reality like Nama Rupa. So all these questions will rise up when we only partially understand Nibbāna as a separate ultimate state. So that's what I'm arguing here. If you go into the 17.18. When this state is thus explained in the above manner, as a state separate from the generation of Nama and Rupa, the following questions arise. If Nibbāna is a separate reality other than the absence of suffering that was to arise had the conditions prevailed. For example, the suffering, this is what I mean, the suffering that would have arisen, that would have arisen, that would have suffering that was to arise, so that would have arisen had the conditions prevailed. So when the conditions are removed, this suffering is absent. This suffering is absent. So if we take Nibbāna as a state apart from this absence of suffering, if we take it as some state apart from the absence of suffering, so these questions we come as, where does it exist? Where does it exist? At that moment, one may answer that it is found in the body of beings, because Buddha mentions in one sutta, Apichakkvāhaṃ āvuso imasmiṃ eva vyāmamatte kalebare sasanyam hi samanake lokancha, not kolancha, sorry, correct it, lokancha. L and K have been, this is lokancha, not kolancha. That is the third line, fourth line, second word. Fourth line, second word. Lokancha. Lokancha panyapemi, loka samudayancha, loka nirodhancha, loka nirodha gaminincha panyapemi. This was said in the Rohitassa Sutta, right? It was given, given the definition, reference. This was mentioned in the Rohitassa Sutta. So in this sutta, Buddha mentioned, I say Nibbāna, expound the Nibbāna as found in means he mentions Nibbāna in this body, right? In this very body, which is like 6 feet, around 6 feet. Vyāma means another one kind of a length, right? Vyāma. So Kalebare, Sasanyam he means together with Sanya. Samanaka means together with mind. Right? I have not given the translation. Sasanyam hi together with Sanya. Samanaka together with mind. Lokancha Panyapeni. Loka means here the suffering. Right? Buddha refers to the word Loka as suffering. Right? Lokancha Panyapeni. Loka Samudayancha, origin of suffering. Right? Origin of suffering. So he used the word Loka, Dukkha, these words. Loka Samudayancha Sampanyapeni. Loka Nirodhancha Panyapeni. The cessation of suffering. That is Nibbāna. Right? Cessation of suffering is Nibbāna. Loka Nirodha Gaminincha Panyapeni. The path to the liberation. Right? Path to the liberation. So this is a saying uttered by the Buddha. Right? So if we consider Nibbāna as a separate state and we ask where it is located, one will be able to say, according to the sutta, it is located in the body. Then a counter question should be asked. Is it the same Nibbāna which is an unconditioned state found in the body of all beings, or are there different Nibbānas found in the body of each being? So if someone says Nibbāna is found in the body, we have to ask a counter question. Is it the same Nibbāna found in everyone's body, or do we have separate Nibbānas in separate bodies? So then should he answer that there are different Nibbānas in the body of each being, he is claiming various Nibbāna, Bahu Nibbāna. So this is not accurate. If he says that it is the same, it is against the Buddhist teaching. If he says that it is the same Nibbāna found in the body of each being, then Nibbāna is found in the body of Puthujjanas and even in the beings of the woeful realm. Right? It is found also in the beings of the woeful realms. Bhante is asking why it is not mentioned Atti and just mentioning Panyapemi. That he's how do you translate this? Because he said it is found in. Like I don't know how to translate this word. Panyapemi, like promulgates in the body, expounds, like something like that. Right? So if one says it is only found in the body, so then Nibbāna is found in the body of Puthujjanas and even in the beings of the woeful realm, and this doesn't make sense. If one says it is only found in the body of the noble, then if one says we have Nibbāna in us, what happens? We also have attained Nibbāna. So then if one says it is only found in the body of noble beings, another question should be asked as, did the Nibbāna originated when the person attained the nobility, or did Nibbāna move into his body with him attaining the nobility? Right? So because it was not there, you attained it or you came into it. If he agrees with the prior, the Nibbāna becomes a reality that has an origin. If it arose in him when he attained the nobility, Nibbāna has origin. Should he agree with the latter, the Nibbāna becomes a reality that moves or expands if it comes into his body. Another question should be asked, if Nibbāna is in the body, to whom it will belong to whom it will belong to after the death. What is the benefit of the Nibbāna to the being who has attained Parinibbāna? Should he answer the being is found in the Nibbāna? It means if someone would say beings are found in Nibbāna, right? His answer should be denied, saying that there is no being in the Nibbāna according to the teachings, because teaching says that beings are tormented by suffering. We are not in Nibbāna, we are in suffering, right? If someone says we are in Nibbāna, the teachings clearly says the world is based on suffering, right? Saying if we say there is no use of Nibbāna to the being who has attained Parinibbāna, then he is claiming that Nibbāna is a useless reality which has no benefit. Buddha mentioned it is the greatest refuge. So it all contradicts with the other teachings. So what I mentioned is a partial amount of teaching which I began with. If we consider Nibbāna as a separate state, these questions should arise. If Nibbāna is such a state, how could it be attained by beings? If it is a separate state, how one attain? Do you go into it, or do you, you move into it, you plunge into it? How could it be a refuge for the beings? How could Nibbāna help to eradicate all sort of sufferings? If this is a state apart from Nama and Rupa and has no relation with them, how could it be termed as the greatest bliss? That is the question I asked. How could it be termed as the greatest bliss? The reason is, for example, so since we explained it already, so this is the suffering that would have arisen, right? That would have arisen if the conditions prevail. When the conditions are cut off with the attainment of nobility, this suffering that would have arisen would come into cessation before its arising. It comes into cessation. So this absence of suffering is there, right? So we would always understand this absence of suffering is more blissful than an object, than another state, which help to eradicate the trait. For example, one would say, you observe the Nibbāna and defilement will be cut off and the suffering will cease. So then Nibbāna is just a help to attain the greatest bliss. It cannot be the greatest bliss. So when the Buddha said it is the greatest bliss, it should not be something apart from this. Right? So this is, if this is a state apart from Nama and Rupa and has no relation with them, how could it be termed as the greatest bliss? The reason is, when latent defilements are eradicated, the Nama Rupas that were to arise become ceased without arising. Then there is no more suffering. The question is, what is more blissful? The absence of suffering that was to encounter, or the unconditioned state which became the object of Maggapala Chittas? It is clear that the absence of suffering is more blissful than the object of Maggapala Chitta. So these kind of paradoxical statements, questions will happen if we just explain Nibbāna as a separate state from Nama and Rupa. These questions can be answered by mentioning Nibbāna as the non-arising of the unarising Kilesas and Nama Rupa. I use the word unarising. Unarising means not arose yet. The realities or Nama Rupas, Kilesas which has not arisen, I call it unarisen. Right? I use the word. The non-arising means they are not arising, they are absence. That is what I mean by non-arising. So for example, if you look at the diagram, there was suffering to arise, it was about to arise. So these unarisen Nama Rupa, unarisen defilements are not arising anymore. It's the non-arising of the unarisen Nama Rupa. That's what I mean. Those Nama Rupa and defilements were unarisen, right? And they are non-arising. They are not arising. That's the abstract state, right? It's a state. So now Nibbāna as the non-arising of the unarisen Kilesa and Nama Rupa. How do we understand this? I'll again draw this. The suffering that is to be encountered if the conditions prevail. Right? Latent defilements. For example, if I say Anusaya Kilesa, if the Pali words Anusaya Kilesa and Kamma Samangita. Samaya Samangita is the ability of Kamma to give a rebirth. Anusaya Kilesa is the latent defilements. So what happens? Following is how a yogi who develops Udayabbaya Jnana contemplates upon the vaya of Nirodha, vaya or Nirodha of Rupa. So in Udayabbaya Jnana, we are supposed to contemplate in 50 ways. Right? We are supposed to contemplate in 50 ways. Each 50 ways are 25 arisings, 25 passing aways. So that is 25 is because of 5 aggregate. Each aggregate 5 arising, 5 passing away. So each aggregate have 10 types of contemplation. So when you multiply by 5 aggregates, we have 50 types of contemplations in Udayabbaya. So now I am focusing only on Rupa, one aggregate, not on the origin side, only on the vaya, the passing away side. So we have 5 types of contemplations. Rupa do not happen in future due to the eradication of avijja. So avijja is a latent defilement. For example, if I tell them avijja and tanha, and this is kamma. Right? So this is what the handout says. Rupa does not happen in future due to the eradication of avijja. When you eradicate avijja, tanha, kamma all be eradicated. So then Rupa that was to happen in future would not happen. Right? Rupa does not happen, Rupas do not happen in future due to the eradication of tanha. When you eradicate tanha, the same thing would happen. Rupas do not happen in future due to the eradication of kamma. Eradication of kamma means kamma loses its ability to give a rebirth. Otherwise, we cannot eradicate kamma. Kamma cannot be eradicated. Kamma loses its ability to give a rebirth. Right? So then, when the kamma loses their ability, rupas will not happen. Another way of contemplating rupas do not happen to continue in this life in the absence of the support given by ahara, food. So when we don't eat food, our generation of nama rupa would cease. It's not going to continue in this life. It is not about the future lives. Then rupas pass away completely without leaving any substance. It means momentarily or generation wise, rupa passes away. Passes away is what we think, what we observe as the passing away. Normally in these days vipassana meditation, we normally do focus more on this fifth aspect. Rupa arrives and pass away. Right? Rupa arrives and pass away. But according to our tradition, we are supposed to contemplate all these 5 types of passing aways. So out of these 5, now we analyze these 5 types of passing away. We call it vaya or nirodha. Among the above 5 ways, the 5th is the passing away of a rupa that has already arisen. So rupa arises, it passes away naturally. That is the nature of a conditioned reality. This passing away vaya is one of the characteristics of conditionality, sankata lakkana. After rupa has thus passed away, it does not exist any further. It does not exist any further. It gets completely disappeared. It is completely disappeared. Its absence is called the abhava panyapti, concept of absence. We don't say, for example, when this sound, the sound I make, it arises and passes away. Now, we should not say, now sound is gone. We should not, according to Buddhist logic or Buddhist philosophy, we don't say the absence of sound exists. If someone says the sound exists, sound passed away, now absence of sound exists. No, we don't say it. We say the sound is gone, that's it. It's not that absence of sound exists. Sound existed, sound is no more. So it's just an absence. We don't say the absence exists. Absence is just a mere absence. Absence is a panyati concept according to us. So that's why I say abhava panyati. Not an ultimate state. We don't consider it as an ultimate state. The same is to be mentioned with regard to the 4th way of vaya. Number 4, for example. Rupas do not happen to continue in the life, in this life, in the absence of the supporting of given absence of the support given by ahara. Generation of rupas in one life stops continuing when the support of food is not given. After the generation has stopped, those rupas do not exist any further. They do not exist. Those rupas do not exist any further. They do not exist any further. Okay, let's repeat it. So this absence of generation of rupas is also an abhava panyati. It's also just the absence. It's just the abhava panyati. But the first 3 types of ceasing is not a mere concept or mere absence of rupa. It is an unconditioned state which can be attained. Hence falls into the category of ultimate realities. According to our tradition, the first 3, absence of rupa, absence of nama. For example, when the causes are cut off, when they are cut off, this suffering that would have happened comes into its not arising before it's arising. So this absence we call as an ultimate state. We call it as an ultimate state. How? This ceasing of rupa, due to the ceasing of avijja, tanha and kamma, it means the causes. Due to these absence of causes, this rupa ceases, is called anupada nirodha. It's called the anupada nirodha. Actually, the ceasing of the avidya, tanha and kama is also called anupada. Thus, this notion be understood. Now, before that, I should introduce another philosophy about a very important Buddhist notion. According to the Buddha's teachings, if you remember the lectures of ultimacy, I mentioned there are few types of ultimate realities explained by the Buddha. Ultimate reality, ultimate states. So one is the conditioned realities, paramatta dhamma. One is the paramatta jatikas. I mentioned the kilesas, some sort of forces that exist. And also I mentioned about anupanna upada. Anupanna upada means, now this is a very important, according to the Buddha's standpoint, as mentioned in the Nakasika Sutta, he mentioned this suffering, even though it has not arisen yet, this suffering, even though it's not arisen yet, he considers you are bound with this suffering. So according to him, this suffering exists. For us today, as we are programming, as we have got our education, we would say directly, this suffering has not come yet. We would say, how can you say it's existing? But if I go to the Buddha's philosophy, he considers this as something existing. Why he is saying it's existing? You are bound to it. You are not freed from it. This is his philosophy. If you are not freed from a suffering which is going to come, for sure. So he considers you are not, that suffering is existing in a certain way. Not in an existence that we experience at this moment. For example, if we are sure that the future that is going to happen, it can be changed. That is the thing. It is not fixed. For example, if we say an asteroid is going to crash on our Earth, in this year, the humans are going to face a great destruction with this falling of the asteroid. Even at this moment, if it is going to happen next year, we are not free from this suffering. We are not free from this danger. We are bound with danger. So we try our best to avoid it. So likewise, if something is sure to happen, if something is going to happen, this happening, before it's happening, a suffering which is going to happen, it has not happened yet, but the causes are prevailing. That is the point. If the causes are still prevailing, the suffering has not arisen. Before it's arising, as long as the causes are there, according to Buddhist philosophy, that reality, we are not free from that reality. That reality do exist in a certain way. How to prove according to Buddha's teachings? Buddha considered in the Nakasika Sutta, he mentioned a suffering, a sotapanna would be, the amount of suffering, a sotapanna would be freed, is like the soil on the earth. The suffering which is left to him, that is the point, that which is left to him. Suffering with what is he bound with is like the soil on the nail. So this is called anupanna upada. This is called anupanna dhamma. So according to Buddhist teachings, these suffering that has not arisen, but the conditions still prevailing are considered as existing in a certain manner. So when Buddha says about the existence, I mentioned this in the lecture of ultimacy, he mentions the thing which has come into the states of arising, passing, and into the state of arising and passing. The things that from which we are not freed from, and the things that are possible to arise. So these are the conditions. These are some conditions that to consider something as an ultimate state, ultimately existing. So likewise, this is considered as existing. So now this absence of this, according to Buddhist teachings, is the ultimate state. How do we understand this? For we'll come to that. This is still we are coming, building up our argument. This ceasing of Rupa, 17.22. The ceasing of Rupa due to the ceasing of Avidya, Tanha and Kamma is called Anupada Nirodha. Actually, the ceasing of Avidya, Tanha and Kamma is also called Anupada Nirodha. Thus, this notion should be understood. In all non-arahant beings, latent defilements, Avidya and Tanha exist. They exist in a state called Anusaya. This stage can be explained in three ways. Anusaya can be explained in three ways. How can we explain this? These latent defilements which are about to arise can be explained in three ways. It is a stage of defilement with the possibility to arise as mentalities when conditions come together. So we call them Uppanna Raha Kilesa. Uppanna Raha means possible to arise. Right? Possible to arise. Uppanna Raha Kilesa. Sometimes without the word Raha, we also can call Uppanna Kilesa. We also can call them Uppanna Kilesa. Right? Uppanna Kilesa, Uppanna Raha Kilesa, in this sense the same. That is possible to arise. It is the unarisen stage of defilement because it has not arisen yet. Sometimes we call it Anupanna Kilesa. Right? Sometimes we call it Anupanna Kilesa. So a student can easily get misled because of these two words. Uppanna Kilesa, Anupanna Kilesa refer to the same reality. So here Uppanna means Uppanna Raha, deserve to arise, can arise. Actually best to say can arise. Then it is the uneducated stage of defilements remaining unassociated in the mind stream and following it. So it follows and associates the mind stream, so it is called Anusaya Kilesa. So all these three names can be used, actually four names. Uppanna Raha, Uppanna is another synonym. Then Anupanna, then Anusaya Kilesa. All are these latent defilements. Defilements remaining in this stage is considered as not arisen, unarisen, Anupanna. But since they would certainly arise if suitable conditions are gathered, they do exist. Because Buddha considered if the dosa, Rupa dosa, moha is arising, even we have suppressed them, if they are arising, we consider they are inherently within our mind stream. Right? Vijamana. However, their existence is not in the form of Chitta and Chetasika that has arisen as separate entities. They are like sleeping kilesas. So defilements in this stage are given the name Paramatta Jatika, not Paramatta Dhamma. They are not Paramatta Dhammas. As long as these defilements remain in the mind stream uneradicated, Nama Rupa process, that is the point, process is certain to continue after death. Therefore, those Nama Rupas that will arise in future do exist in a certain manner even before the person has died. This is a philosophical point. Right? So, in the beginning, it is difficult for us to accept this sometimes. So, this is how the Buddha has considered. According to him, even before your death, you are bound with this suffering. According to him, they exist in a certain manner. Therefore, those Nama Rupas that will arise in future do exist in a certain manner, even before the person has died. The reason to consider them as existing is the presence of their cause. That is the reason. The presence of their cause. Latent defilements owing to which those Nama Rupas are certain to arise. That is why we are not freed from the suffering. So as long as the cause is present, if the result has not arisen, that result is considered as existing according to the teachings. Right? According to the teachings. So if you go to the next one, the supramundane path cuts off defilements. Cuts off, right? Or double. Defilements. Actually, it has no opportunity to destroy arisen defilements that have reached the level of pariyutta and vitikama. Another point is, when a global, I think I mentioned this in the Pahana lecture, if a dosa arises in you, you cannot do anything about this dosa. This will naturally arise and pass away. That is its natural cause. You cannot do with anything with what has arisen. When something has arisen, you cannot interrupt it. It will arise and pass away. But the thing is, if I say practically, if dosa arises, it keeps on arising. That is the point. So what we are doing is, we bring a wholesome mind moment in between. And if this wholesome mind moment does not arise, if this wholesome mind moment we bring in, if it did not arise, this dosa would have continued for some time. Right? It would have continued for some time. So what we do is, we bring in another wholesome deed and we stop the arising of the dosa that would have arisen unless we have brought loving kindness. Right? So always when we stop or prevent, eradicate or suppress, we are dealing with the defilements that are possible to arise. We cannot do anything with the defilement that has arisen. It is impossible. We cannot have two chittas at the same time. So what has arisen will pass away naturally according to its cause, according to the nature of the conditioned realities. So what we are doing, we are preventing a further generation. That is what is called pahana. That is what is called stopping, suppressing, eradication and everything. So when we attain the Magga Phala, at that moment the mind is very pure, there is no defilements surrounding around, there is no trace of a defilement even. So what we are doing is, when the wisdom of Magga arises, the defilements that was possible to arise would be cut off. So those are not the defilements that have arisen. Those are the defilements that are possible to arise, latent defilements, that have not yet arisen, whatever way we say. So we are eradicating those defilements. Right? So when the supramundane path cuts off defilements, actually it has no opportunity to destroy arisen defilements that has reached the level of pariyuttana and vitikama. What Lokuttara Magga eradicates are the latent defilements. When the supramundane path eradicates anusaya avidya and anusaya tanha, these unarisen defilements get eradicated without arising. Before they are arising, they get eradicated. Therefore, it is called the non-arising of the unarisen avidya and tanha, or eradication of unarisen avidya and tanha, because they have not arisen yet, they are not going to happen any further. So, eradication means non-arising of the unarisen defilements. It is the cutting off of the defilements before they arise. We are removing the possibility to arise. We are not removing a defilement that had arisen. So in other words, anupanna nirodha of tanha and avidya. So we are dealing here. Now we are focusing the noble path, eradicate the defilements. Those defilements are not the arisen defilements, the possibility for defilements to happen. So what about the suffering? What about the suffering? When avidya and tanha are thus eradicated, Nama Rupa that was certain to arise become ceased before they are arising. It means without arising. This is called Anuppana Nirodha now. Before they arise, when the causes are removed, this Nama Rupa will also be ceased before they are arising. This is called a liberation. When we say liberation in Buddhist teachings, this is a very important thing. Liberation means getting freed from a suffering that is going to come. Liberation means getting freed from a suffering that is going to come. So at this moment, we get freed from two types of suffering. Suffering of kilesas. If kilesas happen, it surely torments us. So when the noble paths eradicate the defilements, we get rid of the suffering of defilements. That would have happened otherwise. And then the greatest relief comes from the suffering that we have encountered in various lives if these defilements were not cut off. So when we compare the suffering of defilements, this is very, very less. The real liberation I means the greatest amount of liberation happens because we are getting freed from countless births, rebirths, deaths, aging, and all sort of suffering in the samsara in various lives. So liberation means getting freed before the suffering, before it arises. After the suffering has arisen, you have encountered it. It will naturally pass away. After we have gone through a suffering, we don't say we got liberated. Liberated means, for example, when we are sick, we take painkillers, we take medicine. So these painful sensations that if we didn't take medicine would have kept for 1 day, 2 days, even for months. So what we do, when we take the medicine, we are preventing the arising of the painful sensations that would have otherwise arisen. So we get liberated not from the suffering we were encountering at that moment. We get liberated from the suffering that was going to come in future days. Because the suffering that we have encountered, we cannot get liberated from that. And we know that these sensations are changing all this. It means a dukkha vedana which happens, we torment it, it passes away. Another one comes, passes away. So what we think, how long this suffering would remain. It's not the same suffering. It's new suffering, dukkha vedanas are happening again and again. So when we do a treatment, we remove the cause. So the sufferings that would have happened otherwise would come into cessation before they are arising. So it's called the liberation. So likewise, kilesas before they are arising, we cut off, we get liberated from kilesas. The suffering before it's arising, we cut off, we get liberated from suffering. Right? So this is how we explain. But now, according to this, what does it mean? Nibbāna, I'm going to equal. So this approach is, if you look into the topic, we say Nibbāna as the non-arising of the unarisen kilesa and nama rupa. Now in the previous topic I said Nibbāna as a separate state from nama rupa. Now what I'm going to say, this non-arising of defilements, non-arising of nama rupa is the Nibbāna. So for example, this absence is called Nibbāna. That is what I'm going to say. Right? So this is the Nibbāna. So what happens? Some questions can be answered. Why? Now I ask the question, what is the greatest bliss? The absence of suffering or the object of which helps to cut off the suffering? You say the absence. So I'm going to say this absence is the Nibbāna. Non-arising of the unarisen suffering is the Nibbāna. Non-arising of the unarisen defilements is the Nibbāna. Right? Is the Nibbāna. So the previous questions can be answered. How one could attain it? How to attain it? You remove the defilements, the suffering will be, so you are getting free from the suffering. That freedom is Nibbāna, it is something you attain. It is not somewhere else. You don't find it in a location wise. It is something that you attain by removing the suffering that was going to come, by removing the causes. So you don't need to find a place for that. You don't need to say how to attain it, because by removing the suffering that was coming to you, that is getting freed from that suffering itself is the Nibbāna. So the previous questions that was unable to answer can be answered in this manner. But if you take this approach only, there will be a very important question. Now forget about this state of separate state. Right? So if you forget about this separate state and just explains this approach means Nibbāna is the non-arising of the unarisen suffering, non-arising of the unarisen kilesas. The questions will be, that's what I mentioned in the 17.27. When the explanation is thus rendered as stated above, a question may arise. Isn't this state depends on nama rupa? Since it is the non-arising of the unarisen nama rupa? Because when I was explaining this, one gentleman, he asked a very good question. When I explained Nibbāna is the non-arising of the unarisen defilements, unarisen suffering. It is the freedom from the suffering that was going to come. Then he asked a very nice question. Does your Nibbāna exist? If there was no Nama Rupa, then is there a possibility of Nibbāna? Because I'm saying the freedom from Nama Rupa is the Nibbāna. So it means Nibbāna is something related to Nama Rupa. If there was no Nama Rupa, there is no Nibbāna. It is related to our mind stream. Right? Then another question, practical question will come. We know, if you know Abhidhamma, before the Sotapatti Magga Chitta, Sotapatti Magga cuts the Kilesa. Cut Kilesa, because of that, suffering that would have encountered after 7 life will be ceased. Right? Suffering that would have happened after 7 life is ceased. You will get liberated from huge suffering and you get liberated from some Kilesas. So then, we know what is the Chitta before the Magga Chitta. Gotra Bhuchitta. What is the object of Gotra Bhuchitta? Nibbāna. So if Nibbāna is the getting free from the suffering to come, if Nibbāna is the non-arising state of the unarisen defilements, how could a Chitta take Nibbāna before the defilements are cut off? Right? It's another question. How the Gotra Bhuchitta take a Nibbāna? Because the defilements has not been cut off. It will be cut off in the next Chitta. So these questions cannot be answered if we explain Nibbāna only as the non-arising of the unarisen defilement. That's what I mentioned here. When the explanation is thus rendered as stated above, a question may arise as, isn't this state depends upon Nama and Rupa, since it is the non-arising of the unarisen Nama and Rupa. So can this state exist without Nama Rupa? In simple words, if Nama Rupa were not there, this state cannot exist. How could this state be an object of Gotra Bhuchitta which arises before the eradication of defilements? To answer these questions, this state has to be explained as a separate state from the process of Nama Rupa as explained before. When we say Nibbāna as a separate state of Nama Rupa, we can say, right, if we take the first previous statement, it can be said as a state apart from Nama Rupa, so it can be taken by Gotra Bhuchitta before the eradication even. Then also it can exist without Nama Rupa. It is not depending on Nama Rupa. So how do we remove this paradox? It by merging these two theories together. That is what the third topic is. Nibbāna as a state independent of Nama Rupa and as the non-arising of unarisen Kilesa and Nama Rupa. So in the previous topic I mentioned Nibbāna as a separate state. In the next topic, I mentioned Nibbāna as the non-arising of the Nama Rupa, unarisen Nama Rupa. Now what I am doing, that non-arising of the unarisen Nama Rupa is the separate state itself. Right? So we are going to merge these two. To merge these two theories, for that we have a very basic fundamental in Buddhist teachings. Without this basic fundamental, we don't understand Nibbāna clearly. What is this? How could these paradoxical questions be answered according to Buddhist teachings? It can only be done by advocating the following theory. Only 2 states can be found with related to animate beings, no 3. What are the 2 states? The existence of Nama and Rupa. Existence of Nama and Rupa. Right? Existence of Nama and Rupa, and the non-existence of Nama and Rupa. Non-existence of Nama and Rupa. There is no third state. Non-existence of Nama and Rupa is the Nibbāna. Existence of Nama and Rupa is what we call the suffering, the condition. So now there is no third stage. If you remember the lecture, in the beginning I mentioned, if you take Nibbāna as a separate state, right? We observe the Nibbāna, suffering will be cut off. Remember I mentioned state here, Nibbāna, and I mentioned erase the suffering and say the absence of suffering. So in that explanation there were 3 states. The Nama Rupa process, absence of Nama Rupa, Nibbāna. So if we come into three states, it cannot be explained. There will be a lot of questions. So then I explained this Nama Rupa, non-arising of the unarisen Nama Rupa is Nibbāna. So for now what we are doing, that absence of nama rupa, which is the Nibbāna, absence of non-arising nama rupa, which is the Nibbāna, is the separate state. For that, first we have to advocate there are only two states. Buddha mentions in one sutta, I have not given the reference here, I mentioned only dukkha and the nirodha of dukkha. It's a very nice sutta. He mentions only dukkha and the dukkha nirodha. Right? Based on that, he can explain the all four noble truths. Right? But these are the main two. What is the dukkha? Existence of the suffering. Because tanha also is related to this. The noble path also arises in this. Right? So, non-existence of suffering is a separate state. So, this is the basic fundamental. Related to animate beings, there are only two states. That is the existence of Nama-Rupa, non-existence of Nama-Rupa. These two states are not related to each other. They are independent from each other. These are very important fundamentals. There is no relation or logic to explain why such states are found. State of non-existent is also an existing state, I would call. Non-existent. What kind of a non-existent now? I'll come to that. Right? What kind of a non-existent it is? Because I mentioned also that the sound is non-existing. Right? I mentioned the sound is non-existing. I said according to Buddhist teaching, it is non-existing. But here I mentioned the states of non-existent ultimate reality. It is, I'm not saying not both are same. When I say a sound has arisen and passed away, that is a different absence. And here what I am telling is a different absence. I'll come to that. First, before that, the number one, the existence of Nama Rupa is again twofold. Number one, the generation that has arisen due to a certain karma and uneradicated latent defilements of the previous life. For example, in the previous life there were defilements and karma. Because of these defilements and karma, the Nama-Rupa process continued, right? So, previous life, it means the Nama-Rupa process that has begun in a specific life due to certain karma and past life kilesa. This Nama-Rupa process is going to happen because of past life defilements and past life kilesas. The second, Nama-Rupa generation and kilesas that are to arise if the conditions prevail. That means this part, we can deal with it. This Nama-Rupa, if you want, we can stop. This one you cannot stop. Because causes have produced the result. After the result is produced, you cannot stop it. It will continue. This one has not come arisen yet. This one we can deal with. For that, we have to cut off the defilements. Right? We have to cut off the defilements. In this life also, defilements are supposed to arise. Before they are arising, we can cut off. So, in this life, you can cut off the defilements that are about to arise. In the future, you can cut off the Nama-Rupa that is about to arise. So, I divide the number one here, the existence of Nama-Rupa into two parts. Right? Which has already originated, which is about to happen. Right? There is no other third state related to animate beings other than the existence of Nama and Rupa and the non-existence of Nama and Rupa. So when latent defilements are eradicated, unarisen Nama-Rupa cease without arising. So non-arisen Nama-Rupa cease without arising. Right? This non-arising or ceasing is the non-arising state which is independent of the existence of Nama-Rupa. This is the Nibbāna. Mr. Rupen. This is the Nibbāna, which is a separate state. Which is a separate state. Right? It is, which is independent of existence of Nama-Rupa. At the same time, it is the state of the non-arising of Nama-Rupa that was to arise. Hence, it is the greatest bliss, relief and freedom from all sorts of suffering. So this state exists independent of the Nama-Rupa. So what happens? So this Nama, about now when the Nama Rupa was about to arise, when these Nama Rupa are erased, eradicated or removed, what remains is the Nibbāna. What remains is the Nibbāna. It is like a simile if I give. So think now there are only two states exist. So there is a table and this table is covered with a cloth. When the cloth is removed, what happens? The table get manifested. So when the Nama Rupa which was about to happen, when it is eradicated, when it is removed, Nibbāna is the state that we encounter. So this means that non-arising is equal to the other state. It is like only two states exist. So for instance, so the two states exist. So for example, we take this is the part about to arise, this is our life. So this is the other state, Nibbāna. So we cannot do with this part, this life. So because of eradicating defilements, we can remove this part which is about to arise. So then what is left is Nibbāna. So this is called the attainment of Nibbāna. So this Nibbāna is the greatest bliss, absence of the suffering. And this is the greatest refuge. Because, for example, why it is the greatest refuge we call? Conventionally we call this is the being. Conventionally we call this is the being. Nama Rupa is the being conventionally. If you take, ultimately there is no being who enjoy Nibbāna. Conventionally this is the being. So this is the being and I am going to encounter suffering. So the Nama Rupa which has arisen, which is about to arise, all termed as I and mine conventionally. So it is I who will suffer conventionally if we don't eradicate defilements. Conventionally the I exists to entire Nama Rupa. So when this part conditions are removed, Nama Rupa ceases. So then conventionally I am in the Nibbāna. So conventionally if the suffering is for the being, conventionally Nibbāna is also for the being. So we say, Buddha mentions Nibbāna is the greatest refuge for a certain being. Right? Certain being, conventional. Ultimately, there is no being who enjoy Nibbāna because there is no being who is suffering. So only the Nama Rupa process which was to happen, which is suffering, which is about to happen due to conditions, will be ceased when the causes are removed. That is ultimate explanation. So someone can ask the question, what is the bliss of, what would I get from Nibbāna? So if you answer it ultimately, we have to say, even in this moment there is no you. So Nibbāna means the stopping of the continuation of this Nama Rupa process. If you answer conventionally, if this is the Namas, you are in the suffering, it means the bliss of Nibbāna is also for you. Right? So then, I'll conclude the lecture. At the same time, for example, 7.3 to 17.3, at the same time, when Lokuttara part eradicates Anusaya Kilesa, they too get eradicated or ceased without arising. Right? And I mentioned this. And this is the state of non-arising of unarisen Kilesa as well. This non-arisen state of unarisen Kilesa, the Nama Rupa, is not a mere concept. It is an ultimate state. Why is that? We are going to equally say this state is, in the previously we advocated, there is a state which is derived from Nama Rupa. So here non-arising means, it's like this. When the non-arising means the other state. The freedom from the suffering that would have come is the other state. It is not just an absence. It is state which existed. How do we promote? Because that's why we put a fundamental. That existence of that non-existing state is not logically cannot be explained. That is something that Buddha mentioned that it just exists. So now this non-arisen state of unarisen Kilesa and Nama Rupa is not a mere concept. It is an ultimate sense. Another way to understand is ultimate idea. Since it is the state which is independent of Nama Rupa, this state exists all the time. When the yogi was living in the previous life, if he had removed the latent defilements, he would have attained this state. Right? Since he could not remove these defilements, the non-arising state of Nama-Rupa was not attained. So this state existed all the time. If, for example, it's like the boat. The Nama-Rupa is not what is written. If he eradicated here the causes, this Nama-Rupa would not have happened. So what is attained is the Nibbāna. So the non-arising state was not attained. As a result, his Nama-Rupa process still continues in this life. Hence, this non-arising state of unarisen Nama-Rupa exists despite persons attaining it or not. This state does not arise. Another very important point is, the causes are there, the result has not arisen. Another very important point. If the causes are there, results have not arisen yet, you have two options. You keep the cause with you and you attain the result. You remove the cause and you get rid of the result. So therefore, it is a possibility is there that you attain that the non-encountering of the result, or you keep the cause and you encounter with the result. Right? This state does not arise together with the eradication of defilements. It existed even while defilements were present. Hence, it is a permanent unconditioned state. This is the non-arising state of unarisen defilements such as raga, dosa, moha. Hence, in the doctrine, it is called ragakaya, dosakaya, and mohakaya. It is also the non-arising of the unarisen Nama-Rupa, hence called dukkha nirodha. Moreover, it is the relief from all the sufferings that would have arisen had the defilements remained. It is the freedom from all the sufferings that was to be encountered, hence called the liberation, vimutti. Thus, the attainment of this state can be explained with a simile. The unconditioned state, the unconditioned independent state of the unarisen Nama-Rupa and Kilesas become manifested when the unarisen Kilesas are cut off, and as a result, when the unarisen Nama-Rupa are ceased. It is like a table which is covered with a cloth become manifested when the cloth is removed. This is the sum and bottom of the Buddhist doctrine, the Nibbāna. So what I wanted to explain is, so it was a important lecture actually, I don't know whether I explained it clearly. So Nibbāna has to be brought in two approaches. If we take it only as a separate state from Nama and Rupa, and we just take it as an object that is helpful to eradicate the defilements and to attain the liberation, so we are advocating three states: Nama-Rupa, Nibbāna, absence of the suffering. And then this will bring lots of problems when you go into the literature. So if you take, so the best way to, another way to explain is the non-arising of the unarisen Nama-Rupa and defilements. That non-arisen itself is the Nibbāna. If you just explain it in that manner, questions can come that whether this state is independent of Nama-Rupa. It seems like it's not independent of Nama-Rupa, and before the Nama-Rupa is eradicated, how could it exist? Right? So then, both have to be merged in. So it means there are only two states exist. That is the non-existing of Nama-Rupa, non-existing of Nama-Rupa. So what happens when the Nama-Rupa which was about to arise is ceased before it's arising, what get manifested? What is the other state? Because there are no third state, the only state is Nibbāna. So it is called the liberation. So this Nibbāna is considered as the ultimate state. So some teachers say, how to understand this as ultimate reality? Because it is capable of, when this Nibbāna is observed, it is capable of eradicating the defilements. So it is not just a mere absence. It's not just a mere absence like the space. It is a wonderful state which has a huge glory, because when you observe it, it is capable of giving your mind the strength to eradicate the defilements. And it is the unconditioned state. So this Anubhava, this glory of Nibbāna, which enables the Maggacitta to cut off the defilements, it's another way of explaining that it is not the mere space or the mere absence of Nama and Rupa. It is a one state which can have, a certain impact. So therefore, that is why the Buddhas mention there is a state independent of this Nama Rupa, and it can be attained. And this is how we explain. If you go into Buddhist teachings, in some places Buddha explained it as a separate state of Nama Rupa. In some places he explained is that the non-arising of the defilements that was to arise. Ragakaya, Dosakaya, Mohakkaya. So this is my lecture. In the next lecture I'll be explaining about 7 types of Nibbāna and the unconditioned happiness. Yeah, if you have any questions, I took a lot of time. Ultimate goal.
The highest good.
Highest good.
Which language?
I think it's French or Latin. Is it?
Latin.
It's Latin. Latin word. Yeah. Yes.
I have one question.
Yeah.
For example, if you just mentioned that there is no being on ultimate level, no being who experience Nibbāna, can we say that in ultimate sense, Nibbāna and samsara is also the same? There is no distinction between Nibbāna and samsara.
So that's why I mentioned, according to Theravadians, Nibbāna and samsara are 2 different states. I mentioned the samsara is the process of Nama Rupa. This Nama Rupa is what we call conventionally as a being, according to the Theravada doctrine. Right? If there's another doctrine, they would say Nibbāna and samsara are the same. Right? But according to Theravada doctrines, they clearly distinguish Nibbāna is a state separate from samsara. So Buddha, according to one sutta, we have a sutta recorded in our traditions. It says, I say 2 states, dukkha and dukkha nirodha. So when I say there is no conventional, ultimately there is no being, what I mean was, so this process of Nama Rupa, I name it as a being. We name it as a being, as a concept, right? So ultimately there is no such a being. It's just a gathering of 5 aggregates existing one after another. So when the aggregates are ceased before they are arising, right? So there is no such a being to attain the Nibbāna, because even while there is no being, right? That's what I wanted to mention. So if we say conventionally there is a being, so being, this is the being and this is the being who is going to suffer, so being is still existing conventionally. If you say conventionally, when this is eradicated and in the place there was suffering, we find Nibbāna. So the being was, for example, if this was the Nama Rupa which is going to happen, we call the entire thing the being. Right? So when this suffering is eradicated, Nibbāna gets manifested, so being is in Nibbāna. So conventionally we say Nibbāna is the refuge for the beings. Right? So that's what I mentioned. According to Theravadians, it is completely 2 different states. It's clearly distinguished in the Theravada tradition. Okay, so we'll take a break and take it.